He left her for a life of luxury. But years later, 4 children with familiar faces made his world crumble. What happens when the past refuses to stay buried? Ethan Marshall stood by the tall glass window of his penthouse, the endless lights of Manhattan stretching out below him. His reflection stared back, a polished man in a tailored suit holding a crystal glass of whiskey. The world saw him as a success story, a tech billionaire with his company, Halo Tech, dominating the industry. His name appeared in business magazines, his face flashed across financial news. But beneath the surface of luxury and power was an emptiness he could not escape. At 36, Ethan had everything that society considered success: wealth, influence, and a lifestyle reserved for the elite. Private jets, exclusive clubs, and a circle of powerful acquaintances. But somewhere along the way, he had lost something far more valuable. Sarah Carter had been there from the beginning. Back when he was just a young, ambitious programmer, working long nights in a cramped apartment, she had believed in him. She was a pediatrician, working double shifts at a city hospital, supporting them both while Ethan chased his dream. She had seen him at his worst and loved him all the same. Their life was simple, then take-out boxes stacked on the kitchen counter, whispered dreams shared over coffee at dawn, and late-night coding sessions lit by the blue glow of his laptop. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real. But as Halo Tech grew, so did the distance between them. Ethan's nights stretched longer, his attention consumed by meetings, mergers, and markets. The man who once cherished quiet moments with Sarah now lived for applause and accolades. His life transformed from home-cooked dinners to gala events, from heartfelt conversations to strategic negotiations. And then there was Vanessa Blake. Vanessa Blake was a storm, a whirlwind of energy and allure who swept into his life like a force of nature. A model with a magnetic presence, she laughed at his jokes, looked at him like he was the most interesting man in the room. For the first time in years, Ethan felt seen, or so he thought. Their affair didn't start immediately. It began with lingering conversations at glamorous events, her laughter a melody he found irresistible. It was the thrill, the excitement of something new, something untouched by the struggles and memories he shared with Sarah. Eventually, stolen moments turned into secret meetings. Ethan convinced himself it was just a distraction, that it didn't change anything, but the truth was undeniable. He had become a man who lived for the next conquest, the next thrill, leaving behind the woman who had once been his whole world. On the night of their wedding anniversary, while Sarah waited at home with a carefully prepared dinner, Ethan walked in with divorce papers. He told himself it was the honest thing to do, better than living a lie. But when Sarah looked at him, her steady eyes reflecting a heartbreak she refused to voice, he felt a crack deep within him. "I see," she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. She didn't cry, didn't shout. She simply signed the papers and walked away. In the days that followed, Ethan's life continued to dazzle. He moved into a sleek new penthouse filled with modern art and empty spaces. Vanessa Blake became a constant presence, a reminder of the world he had chosen. Yet in the quiet moments, when the city lights shimmered beneath him and his phone lay silent, Ethan found himself thinking of Sarah, not with longing, but with a dull, hollow ache. Sarah, meanwhile, retreated into her work. As a pediatrician, she found purpose in healing others, in comforting crying children and reassuring worried parents. But even surrounded by the chaos of the hospital, there was a silence that followed her home. A silence that settled in the empty apartment, in the quiet of the early morning when she stared at the untouched side of the bed. Then the nausea began. Sarah dismissed it at first, blaming stress and sleepless nights. But when it didn't pass, she visited the doctor. She expected exhaustion, perhaps a vitamin deficiency. What she didn't expect were 4 distinct heartbeats on the ultrasound screen. 4, not 1. Not 2, 4, Sarah's breath caught. Her mind raced. She had always wanted children, but she had thought that would be a decision they would make together. Now, she was alone, and she was carrying 4 lives within her. As she sat in the quiet of her bedroom, the divorce papers lying unsigned on the coffee table, Sarah faced a choice. She could tell Ethan, pull him back into her life, force a connection already severed. Or she could protect her children, shield them from a man who had already chosen a different path. In that moment, Sarah made her decision. These children would not be pawns in a billionaire's divorce drama. They would not grow up in the shadow of a man who had already moved on. With quiet determination, she picked up a pen not to sign the divorce papers, but to write a new chapter. A chapter where she and her children would stand strong, unshaken, unbroken. In the days that followed, Ethan's life continued to dazzle. He moved into a sleek new penthouse filled with modern art and empty spaces. Vanessa Blake became a constant presence, a reminder of the world he had chosen. Yet in the quiet moments, when the city lights shimmered beneath him and his phone lay silent, Ethan found himself thinking of Sarah not with longing, but with a dull, hollow ache. Sarah, meanwhile, retreated into her work. As a pediatrician, she found purpose in healing others, in comforting crying children and reassuring worried parents. But even surrounded by the chaos of the hospital, there was a silence that followed her home. A silence that settled in the empty apartment, in the quiet of the early morning, when she stared at the untouched side of the bed. Then the nausea began. Sarah dismissed it at first, blaming stress and sleepless nights. But when it didn't pass, she visited the doctor. She expected exhaustion, perhaps a vitamin deficiency. What she didn't expect were 4 distinct heartbeats on the ultrasound screen. 4, not 1, not 2. 4. Sarah's breath caught, her mind raced. She had always wanted children, but she had thought that would be a decision they would make together. Now, she was alone, and she was carrying 4 lives within her. As she sat in the quiet of her bedroom, the divorce papers lying unsigned on the coffee table, Sarah faced a choice. She could tell Ethan, pull him back into her life, force a connection already severed. Or she could protect her children, shield them from a man who had already chosen a different path. In that moment, Sarah made her decision. These children would not be pawns in a billionaire's divorce drama. They would not grow up in the shadow of a man who had already moved on. With quiet determination, she picked up a pen. Not to sign the divorce papers, but to write a new chapter. A chapter where she and her children would stand strong, unshaken, unbroken. 5 years passed in a blur of sleepless nights and whispered lullabies. Sarah transformed her modest brownstone into a home filled with life and laughter. Aidan, the eldest, was a natural leader, always watching over his siblings. Noah, ever curious, explored the world with wide eyes. Grace was a whirlwind of energy, while Lily, the quietest, had a gentle, empathetic heart. They were her world, her purpose, and she built a life of love and strength without Ethan. Life at the modest brownstone was a symphony of joyful chaos. Mornings began with the sound of tiny feet racing down the hallway, the cheerful clatter of breakfast plates, and the endless questions of 4 curious minds. Sarah had become a master of multitasking, preparing breakfast while packing lunches, answering Grace's rapid-fire questions, and making sure Aidan didn't scold his siblings for making a mess. Evenings were filled with whispered bedtime stories, walks in the park, and spontaneous dance parties in the living room. But beneath the laughter, there was a quiet strength in Sarah's heart. Aidan was the protector, always watching over his siblings. Noah was the dreamer, building towers with blocks and asking endless why questions. Grace was the spark, always laughing, always daring. And Lily, with her quiet empathy, sensed emotions before they were spoken. Sarah's love was their shield, her steady hands their anchor. But she was not just their mother, she was their hero. Every scraped knee, every bedtime fear, she stood by them, unshaken. But as the children grew, so did their questions. One evening, as they crowded around the dinner table, Aidan asked, "Mom, why don't we have a dad?" The question hung in the air, and Sarah's heart clenched, but she smiled, her voice steady. Every family is different. Ours is filled with love. Yet in the quiet of her room that night, she stared at the faint photograph of her and Ethan, a memory now blurred. Their world was about to change again. The realization struck Ethan like a punch to the gut. His carefully curated world, a life of luxury, power, and endless ambition, now seemed fragile. For years, he had convinced himself that leaving Sarah was a necessary decision, a path to a better life. But as he stared at the stage, at 4 children who looked undeniably like him, that conviction crumbled. He didn't just see them, he saw himself in their faces, the same sharp eyes, the same determined gaze. His breath came faster, his pulse pounded in his ears. Ethan's grip on his champagne glass tightened, his knuckles white. "Ethan, are you okay?" Vanessa Blake's voice cut through the noise, but it felt distant, like an echo from another world. He didn't answer. He couldn't. His focus was locked on the children, one boy standing protectively beside the others, his posture strong and steady. Another boy, his gaze wandering, curious and wide-eyed. A girl, lively and energetic, beaming with joy. And the youngest, a quiet girl who clung to her sibling's hand, her eyes deep and knowing. How? How was this possible? As the children's choir finished their song and applause filled the grand hall, the children were led off the stage. Ethan's body moved before his mind could process it. He stood, ignoring the murmurs around him, pushing past Vanessa Blake's confused protests. "Ethan!" she called, but he was already moving, weaving through the crowd, his heart racing. He didn't know what he would say, didn't even know if it was real, but he had to know. He had to see them again. He reached the side stage just as the children disappeared behind a curtain. A staff member tried to stop him, but the look in his eyes made them step aside. Ethan scanned the backstage area, his gaze frantic. The children were being led by a woman with dark hair, but he couldn't see her face. His heart pounded faster. "Excuse me," he called out, his voice sharp with urgency. The woman turned, and time seemed to stop. "Sarah." Her eyes widened, her face paling. She stood frozen for a moment, her hand instinctively tightening around the youngest child's shoulder. The other children turned, their curious faces now etched with confusion. "Sarah?" Ethan's voice was barely a whisper. "Children." Sarah's voice was calm, too calm, but her eyes were locked on Ethan. "Wait for me by the door." The children hesitated, but one gentle look from their mother sent them walking away, though they glanced back with worry. Ethan took a step forward. "Sarah, they're yours," she finished, her voice steady but her expression a storm of emotions. "They're yours, Ethan." He staggered, as if physically struck. Why didn't you tell me?" Her jaw tightened. "You left. You chose your life." "I chose mine." "I didn't know." His voice rose, a mixture of desperation and disbelief. "You never told me." "I didn't owe you that," Sarah replied, her voice firm, but her eyes shimmered with something between anger and pain. "I chose to protect them. I chose to build a life for them without the shadow of a man who walked away." Ethan's hands trembled. "Sarah, please, I didn't know." "But you do now," she whispered, her voice softer. "And what you do with that knowledge is up to you." Before he could respond, she turned, walking away, her figure disappearing with the children. Ethan stood in the dim backstage corridor, the distant sound of applause fading, leaving only a deafening silence around him. For the first time in years, Ethan Marshall was truly alone. and for the first time, he realized just how much he had lost. Ethan Marshall stood in the backstage hallway, his world tilting around him. His breathing was ragged, his mind racing. He had come to the gala expecting another night of superficial conversations and business networking. But instead, he had collided with a truth he never saw coming. He was a father, not of one, but of 4 children. He stumbled out into the cool night air, his pulse pounding. His driver pulled up, but Ethan waved him off, choosing to walk. The city's noise washed over him, but all he could see were their faces. The boy with the serious eyes, his eyes. The girl with the infectious laughter. The curious one, and the quiet one who clung to her mother. How could this be? How could he not have known? But the answer was painfully clear. He hadn't known because he never looked back. He had left Sarah, convinced he was choosing a better life. He had moved on, convinced she would too. But she hadn't. She had built a life without him, a life where he didn't even exist. "Ethan, slow down," Vanessa Blake's voice called after him. He hadn't even realized she had followed him. Her heels clicked against the sidewalk as she tried to keep up. "Ethan, talk to me." "What's going on?" He stopped, turning to face her, his expression a mixture of shock and desperation. "They're mine, Vanessa Blake. Those children. They're mine." Vanessa Blake's confusion turned to disbelief. "What, are you sure? I saw them, I saw her." "Sarah." He ran a hand through his hair, pacing. "She never told me. I walked away and she was pregnant. With 4 children. Vanessa Blake's face shifted, a flicker of annoyance crossing her features. "And what are you going to do now? Go running back?" "Play house?" Ethan's gaze snapped to her, his jaw tightening. "I don't know, Vanessa Blake. I don't know what I'm going to do. But I can't just walk away." "Can't you?" she challenged, crossing her arms. "You did once. Why change now?" Her words cut deep. Because he had changed. Or maybe he hadn't, but the world around him had. He couldn't escape the look in Sarah's eyes, the mixture of pain and strength. The way those children had stared at him, unaware of who he was but carrying his features. "I have to see them again," he whispered, more to himself than to Vanessa Blake. "Ethan," Vanessa Blake sighed, exasperated. "This is going to destroy everything we have." "Everything we have?" he echoed, his voice turning cold. "Vanessa Blake, what do we have? Parties? Photos for the tabloids? Empty nights and meaningless conversations?" Her eyes narrowed. "So that's it? You're going to play hero now? You think you can just walk into their lives and fix everything?" "I don't know what I can fix," he admitted, his voice cracking. "But I can't ignore them." "They're my children," Vanessa Blake scoffed, turning on her heel. "You know what, Ethan? Maybe you deserve whatever mess this brings." "Good luck with your little reunion." She stormed off, her figure disappearing into the city's chaos. But Ethan didn't care. He stood there, staring down the empty street, the wind cold against his face. He needed to see Sarah again. He needed to understand. He needed them. The next day, Ethan found himself standing outside the modest brownstone. The building was nothing like the towering glass towers he was used to. It was old, but well kept, with a small garden out front. Children's drawings were taped to the front window. A faded wind chime tinkled softly in the breeze. He hesitated. What right did he have to be here? To intrude on a life he had abandoned? But then the door opened, and there they were. Aidan stepped out first, his sharp eyes scanning the street as if assessing the world. Noah followed, his curiosity shining in his gaze. Grace bounded out next, her laughter filling the air as she chased a butterfly. And then Lily, quiet and gentle, clung to her mother's side. Sarah stepped out, her gaze falling on Ethan instantly. Her expression was unreadable, a mixture of surprise, caution and something else. But she didn't turn away. She stood her ground.
"Ethan," she said, her voice steady. "Sarah, He struggled for words. "I need to talk to you." "Please." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "The children are going to the park. I'll walk with them."
"You can talk." Ethan nodded, falling into step beside them. The children ran ahead, their laughter like music, oblivious to the storm swirling around them. "They don't know who you are," Sarah whispered, her gaze fixed on the children. "They know I was married once, that their father is somewhere. But they don't know you." Ethan's chest tightened. "I want to know them, Sarah." I want to be part of their lives." Her gaze turned to him, sharp and guarded. "You think you can just walk in and be their father, after all these years? I don't know how to fix this." "I don't even know if I can. But I can't just walk away." His voice broke, the weight of his guilt crashing down on him. Please don't shut me out." Sarah was silent for a long moment. Then she sighed. "We'll start slow. You'll meet them, as a friend." "Nothing more. They need time, and so do I." Ethan nodded, relief washing over him. It wasn't much, but it was something. They reached the park, the children racing ahead to the playground. Ethan watched them, his children, laughing, playing, completely unaware of the man standing in their shadow. But he was there. And he wasn't going anywhere. The park became a strange new world for Ethan Marshall. He stood under the shade of an old oak tree, watching the 4 children who were his, but didn't know it yet. His heart raced with a mix of awe and regret as he observed them, their laughter, their boundless energy, and the simple joy they found in everything. Aiden, the eldest, was the natural leader, always watching over his siblings, making sure they stayed together. His serious gaze and calm demeanor reminded Ethan so much of himself at that age. Noah, the dreamer, explored everything with wide eyes, asking endless questions that Sarah answered with patient smiles. Grace was a whirlwind, darting between the swings and the slides, her laughter ringing out like a bell. And Lily, quiet and watchful, clung close to Sarah, her gaze often drifting towards Ethan, curiosity shining in her deep eyes. Ethan's breath caught each time Lily looked his way. Did she sense something? Did she see through him? But each time, her gaze would shift back to her mother, and Ethan's chest tightened. "Ethan," Sarah's voice pulled him back. She stood beside him, her expression calm but cautious. "Are you sure you want this?" "I have to try," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I've missed so much. I can't miss any more." Sarah studied him, her gaze softening just slightly. "We're starting slow. You're just a friend, someone I used to know. Nothing more." He nodded, though the words stung. A friend. Just a visitor in their world. But it was better than being nothing at all. The first few meetings were awkward. Ethan wasn't sure how to be around them. He tried too hard at first, bringing toys, offering to buy them ice cream. But the children, especially Aiden, seemed hesitant, almost wary. They didn't understand who he was, only that he was someone new. "Why is he always here?" Aiden whispered one afternoon, his voice just loud enough for Ethan to hear. Sarah's gentle voice replied, "He's an old friend, Aiden. Someone who wants to spend time with us." Aiden's sharp eyes studied Ethan from across the park, suspicion in his gaze. Ethan's heart ached. He had lost their trust before he even had a chance to earn it. But he didn't give up. He showed up, even when it was uncomfortable. He watched them play, listened to their stories, laughed at their jokes. He didn't push, didn't pry, he just showed up. Slowly the walls began to crack. Noah was the first to open up. His endless curiosity led to questions. "Mr. Ethan, did you ever build robots? Can you help me with this puzzle?" Ethan's heart soared as he crouched beside the boy, explaining the mechanics of gears and circuits. Grace was next. Her energy drew her to Ethan, especially when he joined in their games. She challenged him to races, pulled him toward the swings, and giggled as he tried to keep up with her wild imagination. Lily remained shy, but she would sit beside him, her small hand occasionally reaching out to touch his sleeve as if testing his presence. Her quiet acceptance was a gift, a reminder that sometimes love wasn't loud, it was silent and steady. Aiden was the hardest. The boy watched everything, his gaze sharp and searching. He asked few questions, but his silence spoke volumes. Ethan felt the weight of Aiden's scrutiny, a child who had taken on the role of protector far too young. One Saturday afternoon, as they all sat beneath the shade of the same oak tree, Aiden finally spoke. "Mr. Ethan, did you know my mom a long time ago?" Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He glanced at Sarah, who gave him a slight nod. "Yes, Aiden, a long time ago," he replied gently. "Why aren't you around now?" Aiden's voice was calm, but his eyes were sharp, almost accusing. Ethan swallowed, feeling the weight of the boy's gaze. "Sometimes, grown-ups make mistakes. They think they know what they want, but they're wrong." "I was wrong." Aiden stared at him for a long moment. Then he looked away, but he didn't leave. He stayed. It was the smallest of victories, but Ethan held on to it. Over time, the awkwardness eased. Ethan became a regular part of their afternoons. He taught Noah how to build a simple robot from an old kit. He raced Grace through the park, letting her win every time. He brought coloring books for Lily, sitting beside her as she carefully filled the pages with color. And Aiden, ever watchful, began to ask him quiet questions about his job, his favorite books, his childhood. Ethan answered them all, never hiding, never pretending. He wanted them to know him, the real him. One evening, as the sun began to set, they all sat on a park bench, sharing a box of donuts Ethan had brought. Lily leaned against him, her small head resting on his arm, her eyes half closed. Ethan's heart swelled, warmth flooding his chest. He looked at Sarah, who smiled faintly, a softness in her gaze that hadn't been there before. But the closer he got, the more he feared the truth. Because one day, they would have to know. One day, they would ask who he really was. And when that day came, he would have to tell them and pray they wouldn't turn away. For now, he held on to the present, their laughter, their trust slowly growing. He had lost so much. But maybe, just maybe, he could earn it back. The weeks turned into months, and Ethan Marshall's presence became a familiar part of the children's lives. He was just Mr. Ethan to them, a friend of their mother, someone who showed up at the park, who joined their games, who listened to their stories. But for Ethan, each moment with them was a precious gift, a second chance he never thought he'd have. On a bright Saturday morning, the park was bustling with families. Ethan arrived with a small picnic basket, something he had prepared himself, sandwiches, fresh fruit, and a batch of cookies he had tried baking for the first time. He wasn't much of a cook, but the smile on Grace's face when she bit into one made the effort worth it. "This is so good, Mr. Ethan," Grace exclaimed, her cheeks puffed with cookie crumbs. "Did you make this?" "I tried," Ethan laughed, his gaze softening. "I wasn't sure it would turn out okay." "It's better than okay," Noah chimed in, reaching for another. "You should bake more often." Lily sat quietly beside him, a small smile tugging at her lips. "Thank you, Mr. Ethan," she whispered, her voice barely above a murmur. Aiden was the last to take a cookie. He studied it for a moment, then looked up at Ethan. "Did you really make these?" "I did," Ethan admitted, feeling a hint of nervousness. I thought you all might like them." Aiden took a bite, his expression thoughtful. After a moment he nodded. "They're good." It was a small gesture, but it meant everything to Ethan. Aiden's approval was the hardest to earn, but also the most rewarding. They spent the morning playing games, tag, hide and seek, and a soccer match that ended in a tie because Grace insisted on changing the rules halfway through. Ethan found himself laughing, running and losing track of time. He hadn't felt so alive in years. But as the sun climbed higher, the park grew busier. Other families arrived, and soon the playground was filled with the shouts and laughter of children. Ethan noticed a few parents watching him, whispering among themselves, and he felt a pang of discomfort. He wasn't their father, not yet, maybe not ever. He was just a visitor in their world, a stranger slowly becoming something more. "Mr. Ethan!" Grace's voice pulled him back. "Come push us on the swings." Ethan smiled, jogging over. He gave each of them a gentle push, laughing as they soared higher, their laughter filling the air. But even as he joined in their joy, a shadow of doubt settled over him. Was this enough? Was he doing enough? Or was he just pretending to be a father in a world that didn't belong to him? As the afternoon wore on, they all settled on the picnic blanket, tired but happy. Ethan lay on his back, staring up at the sky, feeling a peace he hadn't known in years. But that peace was shattered when Aidan spoke. "Mr.
Ethan," Aidan began, his voice serious. "Were you always friends with Mom?" Ethan's breath caught. He turned his head to see the boy's sharp eyes watching him, filled with quiet curiosity.
I knew your mom a long time ago," Ethan replied carefully. "We were very close." "Why did you stop being friends?" Aidan pressed. Ethan's chest tightened. How could he explain this? How could he tell them the truth without hurting them? But before he could answer, Sarah's voice called out, "It's getting late, kids. Time to pack up." The children groaned, but they didn't argue. They began gathering their toys, and Ethan rose to help. But his mind was racing. Aidan's question had shaken him. The boy was too smart, too observant. It was only a matter of time before they all started asking more questions. As they walked home, Aidan fell behind, walking beside Ethan. "Are you going to keep coming to the park with us?" he asked. "If you want me to," Ethan replied, trying to keep his tone light. Aidan looked at him, his expression thoughtful. "I guess I don't mind." Ethan smiled, a warm sense of relief washing over him. "Thanks, Aidan. That means a lot." But that relief was short-lived, because as they reached the brownstone, a familiar figure was waiting by the front steps, Vanessa Blake. "Ethan!" she called, her voice sharp, her expression a mix of frustration and desperation. Ethan froze, his heart plummeting. "Vanessa Blake, what are you doing here? I needed to talk to you. You've been ignoring my calls," she snapped, her gaze flicking to Sarah, who stood protectively in front of the children. "This isn't the time," Ethan warned, his voice low. "Not the time?" Vanessa Blake's voice rose, her composure cracking. "You just disappear into this fantasy world with her and her kids, and you think I'm just going to stand by?" "Please, not here," Ethan pleaded, glancing at the children who stared with wide, confused eyes. But Vanessa Blake ignored him, her voice growing louder. "You think you can just leave everything behind? Leave me behind? For what? This lie." "It's not a lie," Ethan shot back, his own anger rising. "They're my children." The words hung in the air, sharp and clear. Sarah's eyes widened, and the children stared at Ethan, shock and confusion on their faces. "What?" Aidan's voice was a whisper, his hands clenched at his sides. Ethan's chest tightened. He had never wanted them to find out like this. Not in a moment of anger, not like this. But there it was, the truth, laid bare. Sarah's face was pale, but her voice was firm. "Children, inside, now!" They hesitated, looking between Ethan and their mother. But the look in Sarah's eyes left no room for argument. One by one they slipped past her, disappearing into the house. "Vanessa Blake, please leave." Sarah's voice was cold, but controlled. Vanessa Blake's expression twisted with bitterness. "Fine.
have your perfect little family. She turned, storming down the street, her heels clicking angrily against the pavement. Ethan stood there, frozen, his heart pounding. He had spent months trying to build trust, to become a part of their lives. And now, with a few careless words, he had shattered everything. The air inside the brownstone was thick with tension. Sarah stood in the living room, her arms wrapped around herself, her eyes fixed on the front door. Outside, the sun was setting, but the golden light did nothing to warm the chill that had settled over her heart. Ethan had destroyed everything. The children were upstairs, but their muffled whispers and quiet sobs drifted down the staircase. Aidan's voice was the clearest, his questions sharp and cutting. Why didn't she tell us?
Why did he lie? Sarah's chest tightened. She wanted to run to them, to hold them, to promise that everything would be okay. But how could she promise that when her world had just shattered? The front door opened slowly, and Ethan stepped inside, his face pale, his eyes filled with regret.
Sarah, he began, his voice barely above a whisper. Leave, she said, her voice cold, unyielding. Please, I didn't mean for it to happen like this. Vanessa Blake, you think I care about her? Sarah's voice rose, her hands trembling. Ethan, they were supposed to find out when they were ready, when I could explain everything. Not like this. Not like some cruel revelation on the sidewalk. I know, Ethan whispered, his gaze dropping to the floor. I know, and I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't fix this. Sarah's voice broke.
You wanted to be part of their lives, and now look what you've done. They're hurt, confused, and they don't know what to believe. Please just let me talk to them. Let me explain. Ethan's voice was thick with desperation.
I never wanted them to find out like this, but I want them to know the truth. The truth? Sarah's laugh was bitter. The truth is, you walked away. You chose a life of luxury and lies. You chose her, and now you think you can just walk back in and be their father? I didn't know, Sarah, he shouted, the frustration boiling over. You never told me. You never gave me a chance. Because you never looked back, she fired back, tears spilling over. I wasn't going to beg you to stay. I wasn't going to let them be a burden in your perfect life. Her words cut deep, but Ethan didn't move. He deserved them. He deserved every ounce of anger, every tear. But he couldn't leave. Not now, not when everything was falling apart. Please, just let me see them. Let me try to fix this. His voice was raw, his hands shaking. Sarah stared at him, her own anger battling with exhaustion. Fine, she whispered, but you will not lie to them. You will not make promises you can't keep. If you hurt them, Ethan, I will never forgive you. He nodded, his heart pounding painfully in his chest. I won't. I swear. Sarah turned, her footsteps heavy as she climbed the stairs. Ethan followed, his breath quickening with each step. At the top, she paused outside the children's room, her hand resting on the door handle. They're hurt, she whispered, her voice soft now, filled with pain. You did this. Make it right, if you can. Ethan swallowed, nodding. She opened the door. Inside, Aidan stood by the window, his arms crossed, his face a storm of emotions. Noah was sitting on the bed, his hands clenched tightly in his lap. Grace was curled up in the corner, her eyes red from crying, and Lily sat beside her, her tiny hand resting on her sister's shoulder. They all turned as Ethan stepped in. The silence was heavy, crushing. Are you really our dad? Aidan's voice was sharp, like a knife. Ethan took a shaky breath. Yes, I am. Why didn't you tell us? Noah's voice was quiet, but the pain was clear. Why did you lie? I never wanted to lie to you, Ethan whispered. I didn't know. I didn't know about you. Not until a few months ago. Aidan's eyes narrowed. And you didn't think we should know?
You just pretended to be some guy who showed up at the park? I was trying to protect you. I didn't want to hurt you, Ethan tried, but the words felt empty.
Protect us? Grace's voice was thick with tears. You lied to us. You lied to Mom. I didn't lie, Ethan's voice broke. I didn't know how to tell you. I was scared. Scared? Aiden's voice rose. We're the ones who are scared. We don't even know you.
Ethan felt his heart shatter. Each word was a wound, each look a dagger. But he didn't run. He stood there, feeling every ounce of their anger, their hurt. You're right, he whispered, his voice shaking. You don't know me. And that's my fault. But I want to change that. I want to be here for you, if you'll let me. Why should we? Aiden demanded. You left. You didn't care. I was wrong, Ethan whispered, tears spilling over. I was selfish. I thought I was making the right choice, but I was wrong, and I've spent every day since trying to earn back what I lost. Silence settled over the room. The children exchanged glances, their expressions a mix of anger, confusion, and something else, a faint flicker of hope. I can't change the past, Ethan continued, his voice cracking. But I can promise you this, I will never leave you again. No matter what. I will be here, even if you don't want me, even if it takes forever for you to forgive me. Aiden looked away, his jaw clenched. Noah wiped his eyes, his small shoulders shaking. Grace curled tighter, hiding her face. Only Lily looked at him, her deep, knowing eyes filled with something he couldn't decipher. And then she spoke. Her voice was soft, but clear. Will you come back tomorrow? Ethan's breath caught. If you want me to. Lily nodded, her tiny fingers reaching for Grace's hand. Okay. Ethan nodded, his tears falling freely now. Thank you. Thank you so much. But as he stepped back, Sarah's gaze met his from the hallway, her expression unreadable. This wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't even a new beginning. It was just a chance, a fragile, trembling chance. And Ethan knew he couldn't waste it. Ethan returned the next day just as he had promised, and the day after that. He came to the park, bringing snacks for the children, joining in their games, and listening to their stories. But the atmosphere was different now. The laughter was softer, the smiles hesitant. The children stayed close to Sarah, watching him with wary eyes, as if afraid he might disappear again. But he didn't disappear. He showed up every day. Aiden was the hardest to reach. He maintained his distance, his sharp gaze always watching, always questioning. He didn't say much, but his silence was louder than any words. Noah was quieter than before, his usual curiosity dampened by the weight of uncertainty. Grace tried to be her cheerful self, but her laughter came less frequently, and Lily, the quietest of them all, seemed to cling to her mother more than ever. Ethan knew he couldn't force their trust. He had shattered something, and only time could mend it, so he took it slow. He didn't push. He listened. He helped with homework, read them stories in the park, and joined them in board games on rainy afternoons. One chilly Saturday, as the wind swept golden leaves across the park, Ethan brought a small, weathered chess set. He set it up on the picnic table, his fingers brushing the worn pieces. "Do you know how to play?" he asked, glancing at Aiden. Aiden shrugged, standing a few feet away. "Mom taught me, but I'm not very good." "I'm not a grandmaster either," Ethan smiled, trying to lighten the mood. "But I'd love to learn together." Aiden hesitated, then slowly walked over. He sat across from Ethan, his expression serious. "Okay. But I'm not letting you win." Ethan chuckled, relief washing over him. "Fair enough." They played in silence at first, each move deliberate, the air thick with concentration. But as the game went on, Aiden's walls began to crack. He asked questions about strategy, about why Ethan liked chess,
about the games Ethan played as a kid. I didn't play much when I was your age, Ethan admitted, moving his knight. I was always trying to be the best. I didn't have time for fun. That's sad, Aidan murmured, his brow furrowed. It is, Ethan agreed. But maybe I can change that now. Aidan's gaze softened, and for the first time in days, he smiled. Checkmate. Ethan laughed, shaking his head. I walked right into that, didn't I? Yep. Aidan's smile widened, and it was the most beautiful thing Ethan had seen in a long time. Their connection with Aidan grew slowly. But even as the eldest began to warm up, Noah, Grace, and Lily remained hesitant. They still clung to Sarah, their trust fragile, their joy dampened by uncertainty. One afternoon, as the autumn sun cast long shadows across the park, Grace pulled Ethan aside. Are you going to leave again? She whispered, her voice trembling. Ethan's heart broke. He knelt down, his gaze meeting hers. No, sweetheart, I'm not going anywhere. But you left before, she insisted, her small hands twisting the hem of her coat. You left, and Mom was sad. I know, Ethan whispered, his voice thick. And I'm so sorry, I was wrong, but I promise I'm here now. I will always be here. Her lip quivered, tears brimming in her eyes. Promise. I promise. He reached out, and after a moment Grace threw herself into his arms, sobbing against his shoulder. He held her, his own tears falling, the weight of regret pressing down on him. Sarah watched from a distance, her expression a mix of relief and sadness. She wanted to protect them, to shield them from pain. But she couldn't deny that Ethan's presence, however complicated, was starting to heal something in them. Days turned to weeks. The children grew more comfortable, their laughter becoming more genuine. Noah began asking Ethan to help with his science experiments, his endless questions returning. Lily, shy but sweet, would quietly sit beside Ethan, her tiny hand slipping into his whenever they crossed the street. But Aidan was different. His connection with Ethan was a quiet one. They would sit on the park bench playing chess or reading side by side. They didn't talk much, but Aidan's gaze was less guarded, his smile more frequent. One evening, as they packed up to leave the park, Aidan lingered behind. Mr. Ethan, he asked, his voice hesitant. Yes, Aidan? Ethan smiled, his heart swelling with hope. If you're really staying, can you help me with my history project? Aidan's voice was small, almost embarrassed. Ethan's chest tightened with joy. Of course. I'd love to. Aidan nodded, his lips twitching into a shy smile. Okay. But even as the bond between Ethan and the children grew, a new shadow loomed over their fragile happiness. Sarah received a letter, a crisp, official envelope, that arrived on a rainy afternoon. She stared at it, her heart pounding, dread settling in her stomach. She tore it open, her eyes scanning the neatly typed words. Custody hearing. Petition filed by Vivian Marshall, Ethan's mother. Sarah's hands shook. Vivian Marshall, the woman who had once adored her, who had once showered the children with gifts before vanishing from their lives when Ethan walked away. A woman who had never once reached out to see them, but who now, suddenly, wanted a role. Ethan returned that evening, his smile fading when he saw the fear in Sarah's eyes. Sarah. What is it? She handed him the letter, her voice barely above a whisper. Your mother. She's filing for custody. Ethan's face paled, his fingers tightening on the paper. No, she can't. She wouldn't. She would, Sarah whispered, her voice breaking. She's rich, she's powerful, and she thinks I'm not enough. Ethan's jaw clenched, a storm brewing in his eyes. I won't let this happen. I swear, I won't let her take them from you. But Sarah's gaze was filled with doubt. How? Ethan, how can we fight her? Ethan's voice was steady, fierce. Together. We'll fight this together. But even as he spoke, a cold fear gripped his heart, because he knew just how ruthless his mother could be, and he knew she would stop at nothing to get what she wanted. The courtroom was cold and intimidating, its tall wooden benches casting shadows under the harsh fluorescent lights. Sarah sat beside Ethan, her hands clenched tightly in her lap, her heart pounding so loudly she could barely hear anything else. Ethan reached over, his hand covering hers, a silent promise of strength. Across the room sat Vivian Marshall, Ethan's mother. Her silver hair was perfectly styled, her designer suit a testament to her wealth and influence. She watched them with a calm, almost dismissive gaze, her lawyer whispering in her ear. Beside her was Vanessa Blake, her expression unreadable, but her presence a reminder of the chaos that had shattered their world. The judge entered, and the courtroom settled into tense silence. The hearing began, and Vivian Marshall's lawyer wasted no time painting Sarah as an unfit mother. He spoke of her modest lifestyle, her struggle to balance work and motherhood, her inability to provide the luxury and stability that the children deserved. "This is not about punishing Mrs. Carter," the lawyer declared, his voice smooth and confident. "This is about ensuring the best future for the children, a future only Mrs. Marshall can provide." Sarah's heart ached with every word. It wasn't just an attack on her parenting, it was an attack on her very existence. Vivian Marshall wanted to take her children, and she had the money, the influence, and the arrogance to think she could. But then it was their turn. Ethan rose, his voice calm but fierce. "Your Honor, my mother believes that money can replace love, that wealth is the same as stability. But she is wrong. Sarah has given our children everything: love, patience, understanding, and a safe home. I left them once, and that was my greatest mistake. But I came back because I realized that they are everything to me, and they are everything because of Sarah." Vivian Marshall's expression darkened, but Ethan didn't stop. "My mother has never cared for them. She never visited, never called, never sent a single letter. But now, suddenly, she wants to take them away. This isn't about the children. It's about control." The judge listened, his gaze sharp but unreadable. "And you, Mr. Marshall, do you believe you can provide a stable environment for the children?" Ethan's voice softened. "I believe a stable environment is built on love, not wealth. And that's what they have with Sarah. That's what I want to be part of a family, not a possession." Sarah's lawyer presented letters from teachers, neighbors, and even the children's pediatrician, all attesting to her devotion and the loving home she had built. Photos were shown the children laughing in the park, Sarah helping them with homework, Ethan reading them stories under the tree. Vivian Marshall's lawyer tried to dismiss it as sentimental nonsense. But each photo, each letter, was a reminder of the truth: these children were happy, loved, and secure with their mother. Finally, the judge looked at Sarah. "Mrs. Carter, do you have anything you wish to say?" Sarah stood, her knees trembling, but her voice was steady. "Your Honor, I am not wealthy. I don't have a mansion or a fleet of cars. But I have given my children everything I can: my time, my love, my heart. They are my world. I raised them alone, but they were never alone. They were surrounded by love, by laughter, by a community that cares for them." Her voice wavered, but she continued. "Taking them from me wouldn't just hurt me. It would shatter them. They don't need luxury. They need love. They need stability. They need their mother." Silence filled the room. Even Vivian Marshall's confident smile faltered. The judge leaned forward, his gaze settling on Vivian. "Mrs. Marshall, do you wish to address the court?" Vivian Marshall rose, her expression cold. "My son may be blinded by sentiment, but I am not. Those children deserve a better life than what she can provide. I have the means to give them everything they could ever want. But do you love them? The judge's question was a quiet thunder.
Vivian Marshall hesitated, a flicker of shock crossing her face. Of course, I want what's best for them. That's not what I asked, the judge replied, his tone firm.
Do you love them?
Vivian Marshall's silence spoke louder than any answer she could give. The judge sighed, leaning back. This court does not believe that wealth is a substitute for parental love, Mrs.
Carter has demonstrated her unwavering dedication to her children. Mr. Marshall has taken responsibility for his actions and has shown a genuine desire to be part of their lives. Mrs. Marshall, however, has presented no evidence of a relationship with these children beyond her financial interest. Vivian Marshall's face went pale. Therefore, the judge continued, his voice clear, the petition for custody filed by Mrs.
Marshall is denied. Full custody remains with Mrs. Carter, with visitation rights for Mr.
Marshall, as agreed by the parents. Court is adjourned. The gavel struck, and a wave of relief washed over Sarah. Tears filled her eyes as she turned to Ethan, who was already pulling her into a tight embrace. It's over, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. We did it. But Vivian Marshall wasn't done. She rose, storming out of the courtroom, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. Vanessa Blake followed, but not before giving Ethan one last cold, bitter glare. Sarah turned, and there they were, Aidan, Noah, Grace and Lily, standing just outside the courtroom doors, their wide eyes filled with worry. Sarah rushed to them, kneeling, her arms wrapping around them, holding them close. It's okay, she whispered. We're okay. No one is taking you away. The children clung to her, their small bodies pressing close, their tears soaking into her shoulder. Ethan joined them, his arms wrapping around all of them. Aidan looked up, his voice a quiet whisper. You're not leaving! Are you, Dad? Ethan's heart soared at the word. No, Aidan, I'm not leaving. Not ever. Together, they stood there a family, not perfect, but real. And as they stepped out of the courthouse into the cool autumn air, Ethan felt something he hadn't felt in years. Home. The story of Ethan Marshall and Sarah Carter is a profound reminder of what truly matters in life. Love, family, and forgiveness. Ethan, once consumed by ambition and wealth, learns that true happiness cannot be measured by success or luxury, but by the love and connection he shares with his children and their mother, Sarah. For Sarah, her journey is one of resilience and sacrifice. Abandoned and left to raise 4 children on her own, she builds a life filled with love, warmth, and strength. Her unwavering dedication to her children shows that true wealth lies in the memories created, the values instilled, and the love shared within a family. The story also emphasizes the power of redemption. Ethan's return, marked by humility and a genuine desire to be part of his children's lives, highlights that it is never too late to change, to seek forgiveness, and to rebuild what was once lost. For American seniors, this story is a touching reminder that life is not just about the choices we make, but about having the courage to mend what is broken and to prioritize the people who truly matter. Family is not just about blood, it is about love, commitment, and second chances.